This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee is the Dream Team, my co-host on the CWK program, the, of course, exclusive weekly show we do every week for members of the CWK Alliance. If you want to find out more about that, you can certainly go to our Patreon page to do so. But we're going to talk all about the entire first season of the Book of Boba Fett. Joining me are two guests to the program. First, the co-creator of Coffee with Kenobi, Mr. Cory Clubb.
Hey, I'm glad to be back. Always am. Always exciting to talk about foods and fun and memories and whatever might come up.
I love it. Well, it's good to have you back, buddy. Of course, always good to have you back on the show. Also joining us, he joined me every week to talk about the Book of Boba Fett, Mr. Tom Gross.
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be back. I think, Dan, I think you surprised Cory when you said his name.
I thought for sure you're talking about some other guy.
He was actually in the middle of doing laundry, and as soon as I said his name, he appeared like Beetlejuice. Pretty cool.
How about that?
Pretty cool.
Don't say it 3 times, though.
We won't do that. All right. What we are going to do is we're going to talk all about the first season of the Book of Boba Fett. Certainly plenty to talk about. So, gentlemen, we'll just start out like we do for every time we talk about any kind of an episode of anything Star Wars related. Go ahead and give me overall reactions to the first season and a letter grade. We'll just keep it in the same order. Cory, we'll start with you.
Sure. Overall reactions.
Why don't you start with your letter grade first, and maybe it will make sense.
Well, and maybe it won't make too much sense. I had to think about this one because I did like this series, but it wasn't the best. I gave it an A-, because you have so many memories coming from Mandalorian into this series. I think I brought a lot of that with me, a lot that came with me. I was hoping for kind of that same momentum to go into this series. I was excited about Boba Fett. I'm glad he was back. It was cool to see him in season 2 of Mandalorian. And I didn't know what to expect with this. I thought we'd get this really cool showdown of all the other bounty hunters would show up and we have this big bounty hunter showdown or something like that. But having seen him in that last cut scene killing Bib Fortuna, I thought, he's gonna take over the throne. He's gonna do this thing, and I didn't know what to expect. I thought there's some crazy things was going to happen. But overall, I wasn't that impressed.
Okay, but you still gave it an A-.
I did. No, I enjoyed it, but it's not Mandalorian. If that's putting up against each other there.
Understood. If that is your grading scale, that makes perfect sense.
It is.
Okay, we're going to circle back on that when I give my letter grade. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, you know what? I think that is what makes this so hard. It's in the same context as Mandalorian, not same context, but what else do we have to compare
same
to?
World,
same medium,
You have films, you have cartoons, and now you have these 2 shows, and so that's what makes it challenging. I'm going to give it the letter grade of a solid A. And the reason I say that is because this show, the Book of Boba Fett, challenged me as a viewer and a fan of Star Wars. It challenged me because, number one, it did not fit into the box that I was my brain put it in coming into it. And Cory, I go back to that post credits cut at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian that previewed this. I thought it was going to be a lot different. That set a tone, that set an expectation, and they didn't necessarily go that route. We got a snip, and it set forth this whole line in my head, and I don't know, I'm guessing in many other people's heads, of as you said, Cory, a bounty hunter showdown, lots of fights, lots of this and that. and it didn't particularly go that way. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that after watching it, discussing it with you, Dan, and other friends. So I love that this series challenged me to think. It reset expectations as to what a Star Wars story can be. And so with that, my A means that I really liked the Book of Boba Fett.
All right. So that's good. So my letter grade it's B. It's the lowest B you could possibly get before you go into B minus territory. So we'll do the math on that.
Okay.
It's like
And anyway, so
73.
it's almost
Is
B minus.
that a
B.
teacher mentality there?
Very much.
Okay.
So I liked it a lot. I enjoyed it. I can't tell you how much I looked forward to every Wednesday. Tuesday nights, I was particularly giddy. Every Wednesday, I would always wake up before my alarm, which is always set at 5:15, because I had to get all my stuff done before I woke Mason up. So we had our breakfast race. We could watch it, and then we could race off to school and get him on the bus. So it was always like a marathon, but I welcomed it because he and I had a lot of fun, a lot of cheers, a lot of clapping, a lot of oohs and ah moments. But from a structural storytelling perspective, I mean, let's be clear. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are a heck of a lot smarter and a heck of a lot more creative than I am. And most people, they are a lot smarter and more creative than a lot of people. And they knew what they were doing. I have no problem with how they told the story. I have no problem with the direction the story went. I'm just saying, for me as a consumer of media, it didn't affect me the way that other stuff did in the world of Star Wars. Like, you know, and like you mentioned earlier, Cory, like if we have a rubric and the Mandalorian is the bar, this is not the way. Like, the Mandalorian is just infinitely better.
Yeah.
Infinitely better. And that's not a knock against Boba Fett. It's not a pejorative. It is not a negative. A B is good. If you get Bs, you're doing really, really well. Okay. I liked it, but it didn't achieve the other levels of storytelling that other Star Wars stuff has. And that is okay. I still love it. It's, you know, I heard a great analogy years and years ago, but it was about Indiana Jones. And the guy said, Indiana Jones movies are like pizza. Even when they're bad, they're better than anything else. And this is a good example of how I feel about that. Okay. So let's talk about then what worked. What's worked? And are there particular favorite moments or scenes from this season that you really gravitated toward, that made it work for you? We'll just go in the same order. Cory, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I agree with you. I enjoyed the change of heart Boba Fett had. You know, I saw growth in the character. He's not just some behind the scenes bounty hunter looking to get paid. I thought that was really interesting. I liked that he spent time with the Sand People and learned their culture. I thought that was fascinating. I mean, that showed me that he had growth. But then, you know, it kind of, for the storytelling standpoint, they kind of cut off there. I feel like he stopped growing after that. He just kind of became Boba Fett. And that, I will get to that later. What else worked for me? I enjoyed obviously all the Mandalorian episodes. I felt like you know, those were really fun. I lit up. I mean, you hear that music and all of a sudden you're just like, wow, this is fantastic. Just seeing his perspective, what's coming to happen, these interludes, if you will, were great. Like, so I know we're wondering, like, what happens to Mandalorian now after season 2? We get a little bite-sized chunk of that, and see him interact with Boba Fett, and seeing that the thought behind, is Boba Fett Mandalorian? Is he still with that culture? And seeing those two different sides of things was really interesting as we kind of explored it a little bit. I really enjoyed all the brand new characters. Wow, what a cast of characters. That was probably one of my biggest highlights, was the supporting cast. That really made the series for me. I really liked how they interwoven those in the plot. Some big ones we didn't expect. Some that were, you know, maybe small off the side and brand new. That was really cool. Made me feel like we were in the sands of Tatooine and living there with those cultures and different types of aliens, races, and peoples. So that was really cool. I like that a lot too. One of my favorite moments, I will say, and you know, spoilers are out there, right? So if you haven't seen this, go back and watch it and listen.
Yes.
My favorite scene from the whole series is when Cad Bane walks in from the desert, and they hold this shot perfectly. The timing is really impeccable. He's walking in, and you see his silhouette. And you're like, no, that can't be. No way. And here he is walking in this small town, facing down. I forgot his name now. The sheriff there, and there's a great like dialogue and the showdown. And oh man, I don't even think he says his own name. It's just like that just worked perfectly and introduced him into the live action arena perfectly. I thought that was perfect storytelling, perfect introduction to this character on the screen, and it was a great fun.
That the character you're mentioning is the one that Tom likes to pronounce. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, his name is Cobb Vanth. With a
Vanth.
TH, not a CE. Vance.
Yes. Thank you, Gar.
Yes. I spent the entire episode when he calling him Cobb Vance. When his name indeed is Cobb Vanth. Yeah, that's a wonderful moment. So Cory, you covered a lot of territory in that, and a lot of it is very much the same that made it is what made Boba Fett work for me. Probably the biggest thing, and I talked about it all season long, so people are probably tired of me saying it, is what worked for me the most. And when I said in the opening that this challenged me, it was the deep dives into Star Wars culture. And when you sit here and you think about it, we received some really thought-provoking items in 4 different cultures in this story. We did the deep dive into the Tusken Raiders and Boba Fett's time with them and what that looks like. We really got an inside picture of what a tribe of Tusken Raiders look like. The other is, I guess this wasn't, so I guess it's just 3 cultures that we dove into, because Mandalorian took care of the other one. I was thinking Jawas, but really Jawas was from the Mandalorian. But the other 2 are the Mandalorians, the depth of lore that we got about the Mandalorians, as well as the juxtaposition of Mandalorians and Jedi in the context of Grogu's decision. I mean, the reason I say that challenged me is I don't know that I've really ever thought about culture in Star Wars to that depth. I feel like the Clone Wars, the animated Clone Wars, brought some of that to light when you have all the different episodic moments with different cultures around Star Wars. But it didn't make me think about, and it didn't challenge me to think about what do these people, what is the day-to-day of these people, quite like this series did. And so I really liked that, and it's largely part of my grade is that aspect. Cory, my favorite scene is yours as well. That standoff between Cad Bane. Part of it is the reveal that it's Cad Bane. But if I were to go into, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, I'm just going to say it now. Sorry, Cobb Vanth is my favorite character in this series as well. Holy cow! I mean, I loved his character. We've talked about it in the Aftermath series. We've talked about that several times. But when he goes back to him, I'm using lots of pronouns here, when the Mandalorian goes back to him to recruit the people from Freetown, I was so happy to see him again. And he's so hardcore Western genre that I couldn't help but just absolutely fall back in love with that character. And then just throw in that duel between him and Cad Bane. I mean, legendary bounty hunter going up against legendary in this community. I mean, he led with the Mandalorian to kill a crate dragon. He's the marshal. He acquired Boba Fett's armor, gave it away with honor to the Mandalorian. I mean, think about all the stuff that this character, with the limited amount of time that he's had between the book, The Mandalorian and Boba Fett, the legendary status, at least in my mind, that Cobb Vanth created. And then we get the post-credit scene that involves him as well, that makes us think that his story is not done.
Yes.
And so, oh my gosh, that all of that together. You know what's funny is we really haven't talked much about Boba Fett yet. So I'm hoping maybe Dan will have some words to say about him, but those are the things that really worked for me and really resonated with me as far as top scene, top character, and moments.
So what I like about the series is that Boba Fett, for me, was always a great design character, an amazing, sleek set of armor that inspired the Mandalorian, and ironically, the Mandalorian becomes more popular than the character that inspired him. But Boba Fett as a character was always cardboard to me. I mean, he there wasn't anything to him. And again, that's not a pejorative. It just he wasn't supposed to be a deep, profound character. He's supposed to be and originally George Lucas had him as a super stormtrooper, right? And then Joe Johnston helped to create and flesh out the look of him. And then he became something more than a super stormtrooper. He became Boba Fett, a mysterious bounty hunter who has 6 lines of dialogue in the original trilogy. And so in The Mandalorian season 2, and then the post-credit sequence that Cory talked about earlier, all of a sudden we see, okay, he actually has a new life beyond helping the Mandalorian. And how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit? We don't know. And then you see he's got a mission. He's going to take over the crime syndicate and take over Jabba's reign of terror on Tatooine. And I remember thinking, well, I don't really need that. Like I kind of like how he just left and he helped the Mandalorian. He's got his own code, his own set of honor and ethics, and it's mysterious. And I kind of like that. And I would have been very at peace if I never saw Boba Fett again. But we did in the post-credit scene. And then we got to know him reasonably well throughout this series. And I grew to appreciate him as a character, as a more two-dimensional character. I still don't think he's dynamic. I still don't think he's a particularly deep or profound character, but it's also important for me to say that he doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to be. Every character isn't Anakin Skywalker. Every character isn't Hamlet or Alexander Hamilton from Lin-Manuel Miranda's, magnum opus, or, anybody that Charles Dickens has ever written, or any particular character that you think is important or profound. How about Din Djarin, for example? If you want to look at Star Wars, I would challenge you. I would say besides Ahsoka Tano, I think Din Djarin, Ahsoka Tano, and perhaps even Kanan Jarrus are the most fleshed out, fully formed, profound characters. So they don't all have to fit in that pile. Otherwise, then the ones that do fit in that pile aren't as interesting because they all are the same. So you need to have contrast. You need to have foils. Boba Fett is a foil, and he gained some sort of purpose in this. And I think he served that purpose well. I think he was executed perfectly. And I think it's important to mention that Tamira Morrison was magnificent. He was brilliant. He breathed life into this character. And I found Boba Fett infinitely more compelling when Boba Fett didn't have the helmet on because of Tamira Morrison's performance and his prowess and his commanding presence on screen was dynamic. So we'll get more into that later. But I'm grateful for that. It made me appreciate Boba Fett a lot more. What worked for me was the amazing cast of characters, the countless surprise reveals of who's going to show up in this series. And my number one is also the same as your guys'. How could it be anything other than Cad Bane in that, Sergio Leone recreation of this lone gunman mysteriously skulking into town to take on the sheriff and be the quickest draw in the West or on the desert planet of Tatooine in the Outer Rim, as it were. Magnificent. There were so many moments like that. But the things that were the best for me were the things that involved the Mandalorian and getting to see Luke Skywalker with CGI that was, so much better than it was in season 2 of The Mandalorian, which was already great. And getting to see Grogu's story continue and getting to see Grogu and Luke train together. I mean, that episode, chapter 6, was among my favorite things in Star Wars, period. That was gorgeous. Now, Boba Fett wasn't in it. So that brings me to my next question, guys. What didn't work for you in this series, if anything?
Yeah, I can kick that off. I think Cad Bane put it just right at the end there. He said, "What?" Something like, "I don't get you," or you don't. Yeah, something like that. I can't remember the exact words, but something like,
What's
you gone soft? What's your deal?"
What's
or
your
something
angle?
like that. What's your angle? Thank you.
Yep.
And that's exactly what. Like that was the last episode of this. Like, we never figured out Boba Fett's angle. Like, right? I mean, yes, he brought a different, rule to Tatooine. He maybe brought less suffering to the peoples of Tatooine and the planet. But it, like you said, Dan, he's a tool to tell a different story, and that's why it hurt him as a character, because it was called the Book of Boba Fett, and he was really just a side character, in some sense, and it didn't work for me. It's unfortunately because I thought he was more compelling with the Tusken Raiders, and I was really enjoying that story until they just like really kind of chopped it off, and I thought this is a great and reinvention of this character, and they just kind of left it out that like what's happening next. He just goes back to his old downhand ways to take over. Like he has no goals in mind. He doesn't know how to run the little corner of Jabba the Hutt's palace, thing, and it doesn't make sense to me. Like the idea of it creating this vacuum, and he has to figure that out. But I think there could have been shaped differently in the sense of him learning to be peaceful versus a mercenary style, and bring that to the society of maybe a full mercenaries or something like that. That could have been a better way to explore that. But I found myself enjoying other characters. I found myself enjoying. I want to say the other thing is that didn't work for me is I love the Mandalorian episodes. Like they were incredible, but I felt like someone else had just taken over this entire series. It felt like we've got a Mandalorian crew who does Mandalorian episodes, and we have a Boba Fett crew who does Boba Fett episodes. And it felt like a Mandalorian season 3 in the middle of a whole other show. And I thought, did I miss something? Like if you're been watching something and you skip an episode by accident, and you're like, wait, where are they now? What's happening? That's what it felt like. And it just felt really kind of shoved in place. As much as I loved it, I felt like we're telling a completely different story. And Boba Fett just cannot carry his own show, unfortunately. So, we'll see how that goes, but that's really the only thing that didn't work for me. I think there are a lot of other pieces that connected that were really interesting. I wish I would have explored more. But Boba Fett himself just didn't work.
All very fair and honest. I appreciate that. Tom, what about you?
Yeah. A lot of times when I'd grade papers, back in the day when I was an English teacher, usually the papers that had the most red on it. I know we're not supposed to grade in red ink anymore, and actually now you guys grade online on a doc. So, but a lot of times my A papers had the ink because I always wanted to challenge and push those students a little bit more. And so here's a paper, the Book of Boba Fett, that I give an A to. But I think there's a lot of stuff that didn't work for me. It didn't damage the story for me. It's just things that I kind of scratched my head after it was all said and done. I was kind of like, I wonder why. Like, how did that come about? But anyway, with that said, one thing that really stands out as a big question mark in my head that I don't get why they pushed this early on is whatever happened to his flashbacks onto when he's on all I can think is Naboo. The
Camino?
Camino. Thank you so much, Jiminy Christmas. All those flashbacks to Camino where he was watching Jango Fett fly away. There was never any really resolution, like why he was having those flashbacks. And so I was kind of, I don't know, not a big deal, probably not, but it was only like flashes. And so why did we have those? And I remember, Dan, we talked early in those episodes, like where is that leading? There's something to that. And it was just sort of, in my eyes, dropped. maybe there's something in it that I missed, but I was disappointed in that his flashbacks in the back to tank didn't really seem to pan out to anything. Let's see, Cory, I'm with you on the Mandalorian episodes. I thought the Mandalorian episodes were magnificent. I loved every ounce of it, but I 1000% did not expect to see that in the Book of Boba Fett. It just seemed a little misplaced to me. Again, didn't damage the storytelling for me. It just kind of left me wondering why. And I think the thing for me in that is I wanted more Boba Fett. I wanted to see, how is he going to plan this war with the Pikes? How is he going to create relationships in the city? How is he? Because his whole thing is, I want to create this relatable. I'm in charge, but it's with respect. We saw flashes of that when he's sitting with the families and he says, look, if you're not going to be with me, then at least stay out of it. So we got that. But I don't know. I kind of felt like I wanted more scenes in Mos Espa of him going and building his credibility. And I feel like those episodes 5 and 6, does that sound, there are 7 episodes?
That's right.
I think episodes 5 and 6, as magnificent as they are, they'll always in my head, I think, because when we were talking about just a few minutes ago, things that really worked for us, those were my 2 favorite episodes. But in my brain, they're Mandalorian episodes.
Yep.
And I know, Dan, we talked about the concept of the Book of Boba Fett and all that. I just don't know, after sitting away from this for about, a week or so, I don't know that pulled off quite the way that maybe they thought it would or something. I don't know. It was like a Book of Boba Fett with 2 chapters of Mandalorian that tied into episode 7.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm mixed on it. And I know, Dan, you'll have some very eloquent way of making that helping me to make sense of that, as you normally do. And Cory, I'm sure you've got some things too, but that is something that didn't really work for me either. Let me see. There was one more thing, but I don't think it was as important as those 2.
Awesome. All right. So one thing I forgot to mention, a couple of things I forgot to mention about things that worked for me was, and you both alluded to this, chapter 2 was about as good as it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole sequence that ended with that incredible train heist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then Boba Fett's spiritual and physical journey to become a Tusken, and him crafting and building his own gaffy stick and going through his spiritual, metaphysical journey into himself was the best. That was the height of the narrative power of this story to me, that involved Boba Fett as a character. And we went away from that. Now, some of that is because becoming is more interesting than being, and I get that. So that part makes a lot of sense. And I also really value that they took Tusken Raiders and made them into a true culture, like a true culture. And there's so many parallels to Native American Indians that I thought were magnificent, absolutely magnificent. And then you start to think about A New Hope, and you think to yourself, well, that's that famous scene where Luke Skywalker is attacked by that Tusken Raider. Maybe it wasn't because the Tusken was hostile. Maybe it was Luke was in his territory, and he was tired of people coming in and killing part of his tribe, and he thought Luke was going to do the same thing.
Sure.
That's cool, right? And that's not cool at all. But the idea of framing and restructuring it to make it so much more meaningful was just eye-opening and revolutionary. So what didn't work for me was the unrest before the series was over. That's what didn't work for me. Yeah. Like everything that you two mentioned, I value and love and respect and appreciate, because you've seen the entire season. You've seen everything that happened. You know where the beginning, the middle, and the end was, and you have formulated an educated opinion based on facts. You've seen it, right? What didn't work for me was people unrest and being ready to just not fully embrace where the story was going to go. Did I like everything about the story? I was pretty clear earlier in the show that I didn't, that it didn't all work for me. It's not that I didn't like it, it didn't all work for me. But I kept saying from the first time we watched this, let's see the whole thing, right? If this is truly a book, how often do you read 4 chapters and say that I don't like this book? How do you know? You
True.
only read 4 chapters, right?
Yeah.
And so then, and I've said many times, the reason I loved that The Mandalorian was in the Book of Boba Fett. I don't think of chapters 5 and 6 as The Mandalorian 2.5 or season 3 or any. I think of it as the Book of Boba Fett because in chapter 7, we saw that the Mandalorian and Boba Fett's paths are integral to one another. They intertwine all the time because they both have a similar upbringing to a degree that they lost their fathers early. They had to learn to survive in a very, very different, unorthodox way. They've been nothing but warriors all the time. They have a very deep sense of honor and ethics. That they're a little bit different. In fact, a lot bit different in a lot of ways. But they're also very much the same. And think of it this way. If you never saw season 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian, and this was your first foray into the Disney Plus Star Wars world, then that's how you meet the Mandalorian. And all of a sudden, this character means a lot to Boba Fett because you've only seen it in this chapter, in this series, in this book itself. And when you look at it through that lens, it's pretty magnificent because here's this new character. Now let's not get carried away. Of course, everybody knows who the Mandalorian is. He's a household name, as is Grogu. Grogu more than the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
But if you look at it through that lens, I think it's pretty cool. Because again, in a book, the main character, the protagonist, isn't in every chapter. You bring in other characters that are going to be important at the end. And he's so important at the end that the Mandalorian whisks away at the end of the Book of Boba Fett. That's the last thing we see. Not even the main character of his own story. And again, like you both mentioned, I don't think Boba Fett is strong enough as a character to carry his own series. So you got to bring in a heavyweight, a powerhouse like the Mandalorian to do that. So Boba Fett fans who've been frustrated that 2 episodes of his series that they've waited 30 years to see, or more to see that he wasn't in it, I sympathize with that. The only way I can possibly relate, I guess, would be if Mandalorian season 3 came out and there were only 7 episodes of The Mandalorian season 3, and 2 of those episodes, The Mandalorian wasn't in it. It was only Boba Fett. I'm sure I would feel pretty cheated too. So I get that. I respect that very, very much. And I understand the frustration there. But the thing, again, that didn't work for me was deciding something before you'd even had all of the pieces of the puzzle.
You make a good point there, Dan. I thought it's interesting. I was thinking back to Mandalorian season 2 as you were talking. I'm thinking Boba Fett showed up and everybody lost their minds, and they were so focused on Boba Fett in those few episodes where they rescue Grogu and the Dark Troopers, and all people were like freaking out, like, what did you freak out about? Oh, Boba Fett? No, I think 1 or 2 episodes. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, he's back. He's blasting people. It's incredible. Like, where's he been? And in those 2 episodes, do we really care about the Mandalorian? We do to some extent, and they're not centrally focused on Boba Fett, but I just feel like the context was pulled too far apart. And I think the Mandalorian and Grogu are so stinking popular that in order to save this show, like you said, I shouldn't say save, that's not the right word. In order to make this watchable for fans, they had to have something that was relatable. It's like Darth Vader showing up in Rogue One, like, oh yeah, okay, he relates this universe. It's a hard thing to do, right? It's like I don't know how to put it in play because I feel like there's a lot of things working in tandem. There's merchandising, there's all kinds of things going on. They want people to, who only care about Boba Fett to, pour into the Mandalorians. There's 2 seasons sitting out there. Go watch those. They're great. So it makes you think of like the Marvel episodes. Now we're kind of intermixing things and seeing how people like this stuff, so we can cross over here and cross over there and make sure that we're getting everything kind of in this really nice wheel. But it just makes me think, like, I guess to that sense, I don't really want a Book of Boba Fett season 2. I want a Cobb Vanth season 1. I want to see the Tatooine, a show about Tatooine cultures, or the dangerous lands of Tatooine. It has many of these cultures we've met already, and how they intertwine. Because that's interesting. I don't need these big characters that would are big to the culture. One other nitpick I just thought of when you were talking excuse me, the cantina owner. I cannot remember her name. She was introduced, very interesting. Didn't know her play in the story, but then where in the world did she go? I mean, they blew up a cantina, and like that was it. What purpose did she serve? Was it to show that Boba Fett had respect for her establishment and like kind of had that relationship? But what I guess I felt like that was a good story.
I think
Like
it
it
was
was interesting.
tragedy, just to
Was it
make
tragedy?
tragedy.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just
that's
feel
what
like
that's how I took it. Cost.
okay, cost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even
Right.
even like 'cause she worked for criminals basically, but even she was a victim of the pikes,
Of the
of
aftermath.
drugs,
Yeah.
of the danger of drugs.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with you on that, Corey, because I really came to like her and find her to be a fascinating character. I mean, she settled Black Chrysanthemum down, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, she was a character that I was interested to see more in. And so I think the purpose of that was that, the Pikes being there is definitely brings cost. Dan, I wish that I could do what you've done. And that is find a way in my head for the two stories to intersect.
Yeah.
I completely relate with what you're saying when they're in that battle, and that last battle. And again, I keep using pronouns without names. Boba Fett and Mandalorian, and they take off into the sky, and we see the Mandalorian way between the two of them. That was perfect, and I thought that was beautiful. But I cannot separate in my head the Mandalorian episodes centered as being part of the Book of Boba Fett. I mean, one of my favorite scenes that didn't even cross my mind when we talked about that at the beginning of the episode was Grogu and the Rancor. I don't see, like in my head, I don't see that as part of this story. I see that as part of Grogu's story that is in another book someplace, or another series someplace. And so, but I hear what you're saying, Dan, is that you have to have that Mandalorian's build up and who he is and how he's going to be integral with Boba Fett and saving Mos Espa. But man, it almost felt like it could have been done in less time, and the story of the armorer and the black the black saber.
Dark saber.
No, the saber.
Dark
like
saber,
that.
yeah.
And see, and I feel like we lost some of, when you say Black Chrysanthemum, I feel like we lost some episodes with him. Like I'd have loved to have seen more of Black Chrysanthemum in this book than so much of the Mandalorian and Luke Skywalker. It just, all of that sits in another place in my head.
Yeah.
I mean, is it just the name itself that tricks people? Because to me, like if I get to see the Mandalorian in anything, they could call it, I farted in the jungle, and I'd be thrilled. I wouldn't care what it was called because I got to see the Mandalorian. To me, to me, this whole thing is like getting a Christmas present and then saying, "Well, this had purple wrapping paper. There was no Santa Claus on this wrapping paper. I don't like this gift anymore." I mean, we were so happy seeing the Mandalorian in a Star Wars live action thing that ostensibly was about Boba Fett, but it really wasn't. Like, I didn't care because I got to see one of my favorite characters in a Star Wars live action show, and he pulled out the darksaber, so that worked for me. Maybe I'm just too much of a simpleton when it comes to that, and that's fine,
Well, I mean, you make a good point, but like, to me, it just lingered too long on the Mandalorian story, right? I mean, I'm fine with him being in there. You're right. I agree.
Because he's your favorite,
incredible. But
yeah.
But we just dove too much into that timeline, right? It's almost, I feel like we had a whole episode with Luke and Grogu. Like, those two characters alone are such a huge impactful to Star Wars in general. Like, it's almost like, wait a minute, we just diverged completely from what trade thought we were on, and we were just over here in La La Land now and like living this whole different life. Because that's what it felt like to me. I felt like I've just been transported to a different planet. We were, but it's just like there's a whole I have to like almost trick my brain and think, okay, now we're talking about Jedi way and the Mandalorian way, and okay, there's Ahsoka, great, that this is some heavy stuff. Like, think about that, like the Gray Jedi. We're trying to figure out why did she leave? what's her relationship with Luke? Like, there's so much juicy stuff right there. And like you mentioned too, if somebody had just come in and watched Boba Fett for the first time, never seen Mandalorian, you'd be like, what is Luke doing here? What is going on? Like, you'd be so confused. So I don't like the fact that we have to like trick ourselves and go, oh yeah, I think back to this other show and tie that little nugget over here over this other show. It's too far of a jump for me. Now, you can do
Isn't
that
that what we
well.
do with the Marvel movies, though?
We can, because you can do it well in a context of you're setting it up to work that way. Like, we understand that Doctor Strange will be in Spider-Man and he's helping him out, and this is a relationship and there's things that go wrong, but he's not the star of the show. Spider-Man is still star of the show. And we're following Spider-Man's story. If we would have cut over to Doctor Strange and he's the Mirrorverse trying to untangle himself and figure a way out, that would have thrown us completely out of the whole episode. Like, why are we here with Doctor Strange doing his thing?
That's true.
So
that's true.
I mean, you can do it well and respectfully, but when I sit there and I think, man, I feel like I'm in season 3 of Mandalorian, I shouldn't feel that way. Anyway, that's all to say. That's how I feel. I get I actually like your take on it. But I think I would have done differently.
I love what you said, and I like the perspective of what if it was like a Doctor Strange thing. Yeah, it's complex. It really is, and I think that's part of the excitement. Is that look at what it's got us talking about, and see this: the three of us, 3 friends who love and admire and respect each other, who have different points of view. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because we just like talking about it, and that's why I like Coffee with Kenobi so much. And our CWK Cafe Facebook group and everything that we do, because we have different perspectives and points of view. We're using critical thinking and intellectual honesty, and it furthers the conversation. So thank you both so much for that. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll break down much more of our reactions to season 1 of the Book of Boba Fett. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
We are back talking about the first season of the Book of Boba Fett. And again, I really value your guys' input, and thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts with all of you, because I think this is so cool. Like, I love talking about this. I love the debate. I love the conversation. I mean, my students talk to me a lot about it. We've been talking about our friends and family, have been talking about it. There are a lot of fun things. So let's talk really quickly about breakout characters. Ooh. What character that before this series came out, either you didn't know or you didn't really think about, and then by the end of it, you're like, okay, I love this character.
Can
I go first? Because
no, please, yeah, I've got mine. I'm ready to go. Go ahead.
It's gonna blow you away. The Mayor's Major Domo. Are you kidding? Well, he's great.
He was pretty funny. Yes,
it was great. And the reason I like him. Let's be clear. Cad Bane is my second favorite bounty hunter. He was my first until I met the Mandalorian. Chrysanthemum is awesome. Awesome. I love him. The way they brought him to life. And having those two in there showed us that, okay, Star Wars is a whole new universe now because anything's on the table. Yep. They're in the comics, novels, whatever. You can see him in live action. That is mind-blowingly cool. Fabulous. But the Mayor's Major Domo, that first episode, I thought he was so frustrating. And then by the end of it, you probably didn't know this, but I was educated on Coruscant. Yes, I love that pretentious nonsense. It was hilarious. And it was somehow endearing in his pedantic silliness. I've loved him so much. Mm-hmm. What a unique twist. What a very that's a really fine line, not only to write that, but to be perfectly acted the way that it was. I found myself really, I definitely want a Cobb Vanth series. Definitely want a Cobb Vanth series. I don't want a Major Domo series, but I hope he shows up in some, because he's great fun. Just great fun.
I know when we were watching it with my kids, we watched it all together. And like you said, Dan, I think we learned from Mandalorian, anything goes. Anybody can show up. I mean, Ahsoka, Luke, goodness gracious. Here, coming around the corner, not only do we get 2 other Hutts, which is, how do you CGI that? Come on. But Black Chrysanthemum, that I was just like, I think I jumped up and like was like, yes, and like in my Star Wars mind, I can't keep things straight. I turned 40 this year. I'm getting a little older. I don't know who's who sometimes, but I was like, I know that guy. Have you ever seen that meme where it's Leonardo DiCaprio going, yes, I know that. That was me on that instant, and I was like, I love this guy already. Like, and then I had to pull my comics out. I think I messaged you, Dan. I said, "This is like I had this comic. Like, I felt like vindicated. Like I'm here. I've arrived." But I loved the way he looked, his growl, his eyebrows, his armor, his little like what do you call it, brass knuckles that were like lighting up, and he was just like
knuckles or something.
Yeah. Oh man, what a great screen character! Not only is it like this is like a beefed up Chewbacca ready for action, like he is like nasty and like growly, and oh man, I loved his on-screen appearance. I thought it was fantastic, and what a great character to put on screen. Second to only Cad Bane himself. I mean, we talk about the entrance from the desert, but I think is it Corey Burton that does the voice?
Yep,
of Cad Bane. Oh man, like his little mouth is kind of growling like this. He's got like this like little drool in his mouth, and he's like sharp teeth. I was like, they nailed that character on screen. That's what I liked about this. We did a print character and put him on screen. Awesome. We did an animated character and put him on live action screen. Like, congratulations, Lucasfilm. Your costuming department and your special effects department have just continued to knock home runs. I think they did such a great job. I love those characters on the screen. Absolutely. So cool. So much fun. I mean, so fun.
Yeah. Dan, how did you put the question? I just want to make sure that I'm answering it the way it was intended.
A breakout character. Before the series you either didn't know or you didn't expect by the end of the series that would have impacted you the way that they did.
Okay. So I've already talked about Cobb Vanth, and he probably would be my top. So I'm not going to mention, I'll mention him, but I'm not going to choose him for this question because my choice would be your second choices for both of you would be Cad Bane. Cad Bane brought so much shock and surprise. I don't know that other than the introduction of Grogu, but we didn't even know who he was yet in episode 1, season 1. Other than the day after that, I don't know that I've had more people say something to me about Cad Bane than any other reveal of a Star Wars character or anything. So the reason he stands out of my mind is there was potential. You know, when you take a character from animation to real to what's the term I'm looking for? Not reality, but
live action.
Live action.
Mm-hmm.
There's the potential, especially when it's an alien like Cad Bane, of it looking weak or looking different.
Mm-hmm.
This was amazing replication of the animation, and I even think it was better. Because when he lifts his head in that moment and we see his full face and his red eyes appear, that was scary. I was scared for Cobb Vanth at that moment. I mean, his reputation was frightening enough that you knew something bad's going to happen here. But when you see his face and you see his sharp teeth, the costume department this is award-winning to me in my mind in this moment, because I was truly afraid at that moment for the situation and everything when we got to see his face. It was so magnificent. I love it. And then you throw the voice on there. And that's another thing I'll say. The characterization of him in this, of Cad Bane, was just his confidence was seething.
Yes.
I didn't feel like he was ever not in control of the situation.
Not going to win the fight.
All the way.
Yep.
Until that gaffy stick goes into his chest. And even then, when he grabbed onto it, I thought, I don't know that this is over.
Yeah.
And the disbelief that that this was the end of his story was real for me, because that's not the Cad Bane I know. But who else could bring Cad Bane to an end other than Boba Fett himself? And so it's worthy on all levels.
That that was so compelling to me, that their history, and we only got to see that for what, 2 episodes? Like
Yep.
that's where I would have told that story from. Cad Bane is the quintessential bounty hunter. Like he's the baddie bad, right? Like I feel like that was Boba Fett and Empire, right? He's out there for his money. He's out to make a buck. That's where we see the transition of Boba Fett to pacifist, or to, a different mentality. He turned away from that Cad Bane lifestyle. And I wanted Cad Bane to be earlier on and be like trying to coax him back in or something like that. You'll never do good here. You'll never change the lives here. I'll show you. You're just a piece of meat. You're just like me. That's what he said to me. I don't see you changing you. And I'll be like, exactly like this. We needed that up front to really kind of mold that, and then be told, oh no, Boba Fett's different. Here's how he's going to make changes, and go about that. I think it still works that way, but we weren't told up front that that works. And it just, I don't know. There were just, I don't know. That's what didn't work for me. I think that those characters have such gravity towards one another, and it just could have been played out so much better that final battle, the final duel.
So that actually works out perfectly for the last question that I want to throw out there, because I think it's a good one to end the show on. What did we learn about Boba Fett after this series was over? Think about the first time you saw him, and I'm not talking about the Star Wars Holiday Special. I'm talking about when you first saw him in The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, that's really good.
All the way through. I mean, the legacy stuff doesn't count. It never counted, but it was great storytelling, and it shaped Boba Fett for a lot of people. All the way through the Clone Wars, and then the end. By the way, I will say really quickly, and I think I mentioned this on either Rebel Base Card or on Force Ghost Conversations, but to me, the Daniel Logan stuff, the reason it didn't come back was because he was fondly remembering, or maybe sadly remembering, when he was a kid, seeing his father leave all the time and being alone and not having his family with him. Well, then his dad dies. So one of the points of this series was for him to find his own family, which is a very, very important and prevalent theme in Star Wars. So he wasn't reflecting back on that as much because he had a new family that he found. And besides that, I don't know. I think that's why the stuff with Daniel Logan worked really well, because then he had a new family.
Okay.
This is a really interesting question. I'm glad you asked it, because it makes me think. I mean, I have to think back to the Boba Fett that's sitting in the hallway with Lando and says he's no good to me dead, right? So it's like,
yep,
that is the bad. He's the Cad Bane of that scene right there, right? So it's like he was out to settle the score, make the money, and move on to the next thing. Like, and he has a brush with death, right? That does something to somebody, and makes you. I'm thinking of this as I'm talking. He's a brush with death. And maybe he thinks back to his own dad and thinking how his dad died. He went down without honor, without without relationship. So he's thinking like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want that to be me. So maybe in that Sarlacc pit, he has a revelation, right? And he goes off, and the same people find him, and which I think is a beautiful connection of. We talk about Star Wars and adoption, like, oh my goodness, like that to me, they adopted him into their culture, their family. They brought him as one, and we see so much gravity there. And he kind of wiped that away, which didn't really filter into his character too much when he got his armor back, and we see him take over Jabba's, reign, and it's just like you just put the armor back on and became kind of a different type of Boba Fett. Like I wanted you almost to like put the armor back on and almost reject it to some degree, or manipulate it somehow that works better for you. And I just didn't see his structure necessarily change. I mean, a little bit, but not necessarily to the end. Like at the end, I felt like he was just all just Boba Fett in the sense of, I don't know what to do necessarily. I mean, he sat on the throne, I think, his first episode. What's frustrating me so much, he said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to doing. I think, then why are you here? Tell me why you're here. Is it because you lost your family? You're not sure where to go and trying to make a new family? Is that what it is? You're trying to make a new community and you want to build a community? Give me your goals. And at the end of this season, I didn't get that. And maybe that's where season 2 is leading. And I always think about that sometimes. I think, okay, maybe season 2 will really flesh all that out so that season 1 is really so much more impactful. Because of the events of season 1, we get so much more in season 2. But as far as his growth, yes, I feel like he's a changed man in some degree, but I don't think he's 100% where he wants to be. And I'd like to explore that more, but we'll see.
Fascinating. I'm excited that you're on so we could, because I've been wondering what you thought about this. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I have to go back to the last episode, things that you had said, Dan, and you just kind of said it again here, previewing this question. And I think back to the very last scene of this series where he's standing in the streets. They've got the little joke with the fruit, and Chrysanthemum takes the fruit and just starts, eating it like crazy. And you look and you say, this is his group. This is who he's fought for. He's brought these biker gangs together, and he made a new life for them when they were in, a really bad situation. And Chrysanthemum was, he's been tortured and created into something, a war machine, and he's captured, and he's, kind of a wild creature, and he's tamed him, and he's made him part of a family. And so let's go way back. Back to Empire Strikes Back. My first image of Boba Fett is Vader. No disintegrations.
Yes.
As you wish. And I mean, woo. That's the kind of guy he was. He was disintegrating people as a bounty hunter, which goes back to another character we saw disintegrating people at the beginning of his story. But so we go from this solo bounty hunter who then we learn later loses his father, as you said, Cory, in a very sort of unglorious sort of way. And he's isolated, and he's with a bunch of people. I picture him being on a ship in the Clone Wars with Aura Singh and I don't know, his Bosk in there. Yeah. It's just a bunch of like ragtag motley crew. That's not a family. They just have a commonality. They're bounty hunters and they find that commonality, but they're definitely not watching each other's backs. And so this is the life he grew up with. Now, Cory, you mentioned, like the rebirth in the Sarlacc pit. I'm trying to figure out in my mind, where does the shift in him happen? Does it happen when he's in the Sarlacc pit? Clearly he wants to survive and he gets out of that. But I'm not convinced I'm not convinced that the Jawas don't find him and he were to lay there in his armor and wake up. He would go back. I feel like he would have gone back to being a bounty hunter. I think losing the armor and then being picked up by Tusken Raiders is what changes him. I don't think he could have changed if he continued to have the armor. And my evidence of that is as he's trying to, so we're back into the current day story with, we haven't said her word yet. Her name this entire episode. He has her rebuilt. No. He has her rebuilt. No. What's her name? She's a bounty hunter.
Oh, Fennec Shand.
Fennec Shand. I couldn't think of it either.
We haven't mentioned her once.
I know you were talking about. Yeah.
When he's with her and he's got to find his armor, and he's got to find his armor, I'm like, that's how I know a change is about to happen. Is that where I was headed with that? Well, anyway, but it's, he has that. And I think I said in the episode, Dan, that we had about that scene is like, he has this inferiority complex. He's not sure that he's who he is without his armor. But when he gets it back, he realizes that's not, he doesn't have that life anymore. And so we see the change, because then he goes and he's like, I'm going to lead with respect, and I'm going to do all of this. I'm going to make all of these changes. And I never felt like he wanted Jabba's job to be a ruler. He wanted Jabba's job to create a culture like the Tusken Raiders had. Maybe not exactly like that, but he wanted to create community like the Tusken Raiders had. And so, I don't know, I've sort of beat around the bush and I'm rambling at the moment, but I hope I've answered that question. because I definitely do believe that we saw a change in Boba Fett. And honestly feel that that's why a lot of people were frustrated, because that's not what the expectation was. As when we came into the show, we saw him walk up, cold-blooded murder of Bib Fortuna, and he sits down on the throne with all the attitude, and Fennec Shan walks around with all of her attitude and has the bottle, and that was a completely different feel than what this entire series was. Is that bad? I don't think so at all. I think it was what gave me the realization that Boba Fett has changed.
Expectation without regulation leads to consternation and fan constipation. If you were expecting Boba Fett to be,
that was great. I want to say, pause for a minute.
Yes, we need your sound effects.
Well, thank you.
Done.
Yeah, so let me try to explain that a little bit. Yeah, so when what we know about Boba Fett is this is funny. I don't know, but we know about Boba Fett was nothing. We knew he looked cool. We knew he was tough. We read all about how he's this dangerous, notorious bounty hunter. And then to me, the best Boba Fett we ever saw, ever in anything, period, is in The Mandalorian Season 2, The Tragedy. When he gets his armor back, when he takes those gaffy sticks and he starts smashing those stormtroopers and frightening the heck out of them and making his presence known and donning that armor once again, explaining that he's got a chain code and that he was in fact that his father was a foundling. That was the pinnacle. So everyone was led to believe, including me, logically and plausibly, this is what we're going to see: a ruthless, tough guy who's got his own unique, mysterious code of honor. Once we get to spend more time with him in this series, that's gone. That doesn't exist anymore, because now you're under the hood of him so much so that he almost never wears the armor and the helmet. And I have no idea. I'm sure someone has done like a screen grab or like a timestamp of how long in the Book of Boba Fett he's wearing the helmet versus how much he is. And I promise you, it's not even close to the same. Right. I'm sure it's not at all.
Right.
And so what we got to know was a character there who wasn't what we thought. So did he grow or change? He did. But I think it's fair to say that he's not the same character we were expecting.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But it's not okay if you're expecting something else. And that's the challenge with him. If it's the Spider-Man series, we know what we're going to get. We already know Spider-Man is very well established. Luke Skywalker, very well established. Han Solo, not profoundly deep or dynamic, but very charismatic and very charming. We know what we're getting with Han Solo. We didn't really know what we're going to get with Boba Fett besides one episode. Because in the other episodes of Season 2 of The Mandalorian, he's hardly in it. He flies his ship around, and he has some cool lines, and he has a really cool confrontation in a cantina, right? Costco Reeves, yeah. And then
Bo-Katan.
Katie Sackhoff, Bo-Katan, yeah. So they has that, but then we don't really get much about him, so we don't really know him at all. So if you're expecting like a Deadpool type of character, apparently that's not who Boba Fett is, because that is what Jon Favreau and Robert Rodriguez and Dave Filoni have told us. So is it what I wanted or what I expected? Would I like to see a more edgy Boba Fett? Yeah, I think I would. But what I got was cool because I didn't expect it. Like, I don't want to, just because I want something doesn't mean it's what I actually need. This story isn't over. Meaning, The Mandalorian, Boba Fett, this whole Disney Plus Star Wars universe is not over. It's not even close to over. Thank goodness. So let's again, that's why I gave it a B. I gave it a lower grade than both of you. Because as much as I liked it, I know there was things that didn't pay off the way that maybe, I don't know, it didn't work for me, but that doesn't make it bad. It makes it different. I like different. So I think we did learn about him, but I still think from where he was at the beginning of chapter 1 to the end of chapter 7, there is growth. There is an interesting change. There's a very small arc, but it's not profoundly dynamic, because the one thing he does learn, besides wanting to have his family, which I love, and I agree, I don't think it's the Sarlacc pit, I think it's the Tuscans. I think that is 100% it. And then we kind of lost that. Chapter 2 was the ultimate high point, was the ultimate narrative beat. So we got the climax really, really early, which is very unusual. So you bring in a heavyweight like the Mandalorian, and that changes things quite a bit. But
Yeah.
what he does learn is restraint. I think he's stronger in this series than he is in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, because when Cad Bane says, if you're weak, if you don't think of only yourself, he keeps goading him into violence. I mean, and Boba Fett does do the ultimate violence. He does kill Cad Bane punctuates that emphatically with a gaffney stick, literally and figuratively. Yeah. But he learns restraint. He learns to hold back a little bit. He's not a bloodthirsty monster. He says, I'm tired of these idiots getting us killed. Maybe we should walk our own path, make our own decisions, show some restraint. Restraint is strength more than other characters that are supposedly strong. So from that perspective, I think that's where we're at.
One thing I'll say, and then maybe we can wrap. One of the best advice I was given around storytelling is give the readers what they want or something better, right? So what do we want out of Mandalorian? Well, we wanted to see a Mandalorian, I guess. I don't know what to expect. We got something better. We got Grogu. We got something crazy better. And what you build on season 2, you took what people expected and built on that and made it even better. I think what you said, Dan, is great. We have an expectation built up. We expect something to happen, but what we got wasn't what we expected, and really wasn't better than we expected. It was different. I think you can take different and say, oh, I didn't expect that, but that's great because I didn't know I wanted that, but now I do. I do know I want that. Same thing with, I can relate to Mandalorian. Like, I didn't know I wanted Grogu, but I got it. Who wants to explore the Yoda species? Well, I do, but I don't know how you're gonna do it. But we gave you something you better than you expected, and that's why I think it kind of faltered a little bit. I think they were trying to do something unique, something a little bit different, like you said. I think that's admirable, but it didn't really pay off in the end. So that's where maybe a season 2, like you said, hopefully that's the big payoff. We haven't heard the whole story yet. So, yeah.
Awesome. Love it. Well, thank you so much. Tom, anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think I've said everything I need to say. And you guys, I appreciate both of what you've said through this. It doesn't really change my grade any. I still think it's an A for me. I love the way it drives the Star Wars story and galaxy forward. I definitely don't think this is a backwards turn. So I look forward to seeing what comes next for sure.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let us know. Go ahead, Cory.
I was gonna say I was gonna change my grade after we got done with like the things we didn't like. I was like, these guys are right. I'm gonna change my grade lower, but I'm gonna leave it at an A- too because of the conversation we've had. I think you guys have some great insights. I mean, that's why I love discussing this stuff with you guys like this, because I feel like you bring a lot of gravity to like, oh, I didn't really like that thing, and you're like, going, hey, but you see it from this perspective, and go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. So, I'm keep my grade the same, A-.
Forever grateful for differences in opinion because it teaches us to grow. Love that so much. Well, Cory and Tom, thank you both so much. Please let us know in the CWK Cafe or wherever you want to reach out to us on Coffee with Kenobi. What do you think about this season overall? And remember, this week, the next Facebook Live is going to be your top 5 moments from the Book of Boba Fett's first season. We're excited to see what you think. We certainly appreciate you joining us each and every week on Coffee with Kenobi. We've got show number 500 coming out next week, and it's going to be a blockbuster. I can't wait to share it with you. But Cory Clubb, thank you again so much, my friend, for, of course, being on the show. Looking forward to hanging out with you at Celebration and beyond. Where can people reach out to you to continue the conversation?
Yeah. If you want to tell me all your thoughts and feelings around Book of Boba Fett or Mandalorian, or what you like, what you didn't like, or how much you want to try out some of that spice, who knows? I'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and check me out on Twitter at Cory Clubb, and catch me there, or send me an email, coryc@coffeewithkenobi.com.
And Tom, what about you?
Yeah. Reach out to me on Twitter as well. That's the best place probably, at Draft Line. Love to hear your thoughts on the season as a whole, what you got going on there. So yeah, thanks for having me on, Dan.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.